Hey folks, welcome back. We're going to do some tomato comparisons as our tomatoes start getting ripe, and it's going to probably take a week or two to get all of these done because the larger variety tomatoes that we planted are just now starting to turn red for us. And I like a good vine ripened tomato. I'm not going to pick it partially green, but we'll have to fight the birds for them because as soon as they turn nice and red, the birds want to get down there and peck at them. So we'll start this series off, and we'll go through tasting the tomato. We'll go over the size of it and how it's performing out in the garden and any other little issues it may have. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first tomato we're going to review is the Better Boy variety. It's a medium to large tomato. It has a smooth skin without a lot of the cracks and crevices in the top of the tomato, and that's why I like it, because it's a better slicer like that. It's one of my favorite tomatoes from the past growing that I've done, but I was having trouble with it in recent years, and I think some of it could have had to do with like soil quality and stuff like that. But we got a good crop of these this year. The plant performed very well. It has set lots of fruit on the plant. So we're going to get into this thing and we'll taste test it. So you can see the inside of the Better Boy doesn't have an extreme amount of pulp. It's a very meaty tomato, which makes it a really good variety for canning and such. So let's take a little taste. I've already put a little salt on these. Really, really delicious tomato flavor. It's not very acidic at all. It's got a very good balance, and that's why I've always liked this tomato, between acidic and sweet. It's a great balance. It's not too sweet and it's not too acidic. It's like the perfect balance. So all in all, this is a very good tomato, and now that I've got some soil that'll produce good tomatoes, this is going to be one of my go-to tomatoes here in the future on the homestead. Now, we have a lot of other varieties to go through, so you never know. I might find one that I like a little bit better, but moving forward, this is going to be a hard one to beat. This one sets the bar pretty high. One thing I failed to mention, which I'll mention on the subsequent tomato varieties we try, the Better Boy is an indeterminate tomato. The next tomato we will review is called the Marigold variety. It looks similar to the Better Boy tomato that we just did the review on. However, looking at the fruit on the vine, the Marigold seems to be just a little bit smaller, maybe not medium to large, but more medium. And we'll see how, when the plant progresses, if we get any larger ones, but that's what they're just looking like now with all the fruit that's on the plant. This is a determinate variety, which means the vine's going to grow a determinate amount of time and then it's just going to stop growing. We're going to slice into this. This is the first time I've experienced this tomato, so we'll see what it looks like inside. On the inside of the tomato, there's a little bit more pulp and seeds than the Better Boy has. Very symmetrical inside, very even. It's a good OCD tomato, I guess. Let's give this one a try. Very different. Maybe just a hair more acidic than the Better Boy. Let me take another shot of that. Still has a pleasant flavor. Not terribly acidic, but a little more acidic than the Better Boy. I think it'd be a good all-around tomato. I would say so far it's number 2, and we've only done 2, of course. But it's not a bad tomato. It's pleasant. So All in all, I would recommend the Mariglobe. So our next tomato for review is our San Marzano tomato. This is our first red San Marzano that we have. It is a determinate variety tomato. Very similar to the Roma tomato, kind of a different class of tomato. It's not like a big slicer. It's a real compact tomato, but traditionally, like the Roma, they're very meaty on the inside. So there's not a lot of pulp, not a lot of seeds, which is good for making like tomato paste and tomato sauces and stuff like that. You don't end up with so much liquid coming out of the tomato. Just like a cherry tomato, these plants, the San Marzano and the Roma, put on lots and lots of fruit. They're very good performers. And they are a determinate variety, so a lot of your fruit will ripen kind of around the same time. So that's pretty good if you're doing canning and stuff like that. Let's get this thing cut open and we'll see what it looks like and what it tastes like. So as promised, there's not a lot of seeds, not a lot of pulp in these tomatoes. The core does go fairly deep in these tomatoes. You can see the top 3 slices all have what seems like a little bit of core in them. Let's give them a little taste. We'll hit them with a little bit of kosher salt. Give these a shot. Now, not bursting with flavor. They do have lots of tomato flavor. A little higher in the acid department, which will help again with the canning. You could probably get by without adding any lemon juice in this tomato when you're canning it. But unlike the big slicers that we like having, this probably wouldn't be a tomato, wouldn't be your first one that you'd pick just for fresh eating. But for canning, you know, that would be a real good tomato. So the San Marzano probably will be another tomato that we do plant in the garden again, along with the Better Boy, because we are going to can a lot of tomatoes, and that'll be real handy to not have so much juice. And for spaghetti sauces and tomato sauces and stuff like that, you know, that tomato will be just fine. It's got plenty of tomato flavor. It just didn't have the sweet, kind of delicate flavor like you want out of a fresh eating tomato. So let's move on. The next variety is called a bush cherry, another determinate tomato. I've tasted some of these already in the garden, so I kind of know what I'm in for already. They're a larger cherry tomato. The fruits go from anywhere from 1.5 inches to 1 inch. So let's give this one a shot. Nice big ripe one. Lots of pulp. Kind of bursts in your mouth. It's a very acidic tomato. There's not a terrible amount of sweetness, and I knew that already. I'm contemplating pulling these tomatoes out because they're way too acidic for me. I like a sweeter cherry tomato, just like all my other tomatoes. But it's a great performer as far as setting fruit. Like any cherry tomatoes, you're going to get lots and lots of fruit on your vines. I don't know that I would plant this one ever again because it's too acidic for me, and if I'm eating a fresh tomato, especially a cherry tomato, I want a really sweet tomato. If you've ever had like the Sun Gold, which I didn't plant this year for some reason, I just didn't come across the seeds, or the little yellow pear, small cherry tomatoes, those are phenomenal. They're super sweet and really good. But we do have another cherry tomato variety that we're going to try. So on the scale, I don't give this one real high marks because of the flavor. Also, This variety has lots of blight, probably halfway up the vine. Got blight very early because of some rain that we had, so it's very susceptible to blight. At least it was in my garden. So probably not going to plant this one again. The next tomato is another cherry variety called Sweet 100. And by the looks of the vine, they should probably call this thing Sweet 1000, because there's lots and lots of fruit, and it's a very tall, indeterminate variety tomato. And we're going to have 1,000 of these things, literally. But let's give it a taste test. Very sweet, very nice, and not an explosion of pulp in your mouth. There is some pulp, but nowhere near that bush cherry tomato. Very good mouthfeel on this tomato. The tomato vine looks really good. It looks like it's resistant to disease, and a great tomato. This would be a tomato that your kids would literally sit out there and eat tomatoes in the garden because they got that good of a flavor. Very similar to the Sun Gold in my opinion. But this is going to be one of our favorites, I think. I would definitely plant this one again. Again, it's got a great mouthfeel and very good taste. And very, very prolific in the garden. The vines look beautiful. So this is a keeper. One thing I failed to mention about the Sweet 100 tomato, they kind of grow in clusters like a grape, and the tops of the clusters will ripen faster than the bottom of the cluster. So from top to bottom, you'll get the red, and then the bottom of the cluster will still be green. The next tomato is called a Garden Leader Monster. It's a medium to large tomato. It's got some bumps on top, but not as much as some of the tomatoes out there. You could still get some good slices out of this tomato. It's good size. So this is, let's see, indeterminate tomato. So let's cut it open and see what the inside looks like. So here's what she looks like on the inside. I'm somewhat impressed with the meatiness of this tomato. There's not an extreme amount of pulp. Let's give this thing a taste. That has a good tomato flavor. It's got a very good balance between acid and sweet. It reminds me of the Better Boy tomato, which I told you before is kind of my favorite tomato. This tastes very similar and is a little bit bigger fruit. So I'm thinking if I come across these seeds again next year, this will be a contender for the garden. Sorry, we're going to have to pause because this tomato here is worthy of a tomato sandwich. And I just happened to have some bacon left over from breakfast. So stand by. Folks, I have no words to describe how good that was. I was waiting for that all summer, all spring, all fall, all winter since last year. I didn't even get any very good tomatoes last year. But if you've never had a homegrown, home vine ripened tomato, you are just missing out. Oh my gosh. The store-bought tomatoes, just not even close. So let's get on with it. All right, our next victim here is a Jubilee brand or species of tomato, or variety, I should say. It's a kind of yellow to orange colored tomato. It's indeterminate. The plant is doing well in the garden. It seems fairly resistant to blight. And the plant has grown pretty tall. So let's get this cut open and see what we got. All right, it's a nice looking tomato, gorgeous color. Would look really good in a salad or whatever you want to throw it in. So it's all about the taste test now. One more. Not bad. It's more acidic, more on the acidic side of things. If you like an acidic tomato, it'd be a great tomato for you. It's decent size. It's about medium size. It's more acidic than I like, if you haven't gathered that earlier in this video. But it's got a good tomato flavor, and I'm not going to waste them, definitely. I'll throw them in when we do a big batch of sauce. But again, that's a beautiful color. Very, very flashy kind of tomato. There's not an excessive amount of pulp in it. Kind of meaty if you're looking at that one, but that slice is more towards the bottom. That's more towards the middle there. But kind of meaty tomato. Not terrible, but again, I'm not a big fan of the acid. So let's move on. Now let's stop and talk about acidity, or level of acid in a tomato, for a second. I don't want you to think a higher acid tomato is a bad thing. I'm referring more to fresh eating type tomato, or something you'd want to put on maybe a sandwich that you're going to want a big hunk of. Now, culinarily speaking, there's some things that a little bit of acid would add some brightness to, so there is a place for acidic tomatoes. There really is. They do can better because of their level of acidity. It's safer to can those. You don't need to really worry about adding like any lemon juice like you would for the sweeter tomatoes to bring the acid level up to make it safe to water bath can. So, acidity is not always a terrible thing. I don't want to give you the wrong idea. But for a fresh eating tomato, it's kind of where I'm going with this video. That's what I'm basing my reviews on. So don't think it's all bad. The next variety we're going to try is Mortgage Lifter. And I can tell you by the looks of the plants in the garden and the amount of fruit set on the vine, it's not going to lift my mortgage or anybody else's. Maybe it's just the region we're in, but I'm not impressed with the plant at all. So it's indeterminate plant. Again, I have varieties that grow much better out here, but let's slice her open and give it a try. Now the outside of the tomato is kind of a mottled color, and the inside of the tomato is a little bit deeper red than the outside. It's got a fair amount of pulp on the inside, not too much. It's off-putting, but a little bit more than I think some of the varieties we've been trying so far. So we'll give one of these a taste. It's got a good flavor. Let's get another one of these going. Definitely a good flavor. I would say on the acid side, if acidity were judged 1 to 10, this would be about a 7. If a Better Boy was about a 5, this would be about a 7. It's got a decent mouth feel. It's not as good as the meatier tomatoes, because I believe the meatier tomatoes give a better mouth feel than lots of pulp. But it's got a it really like the flavor of this tomato. if the plant grew better in my area, it'd be a decent tomato to grow. Not my favorite, of course. You know what my favorite is so far. But it's not a bad tomato. I would eat it. And I would grow it again if I had lots of room. But I'm going to try to cut down on my tomato varieties like next year. So this one probably won't make the cut. But I don't think you'd be disappointed in this tomato if you had it in your garden. One more thing I think I feel I need to explain. When I comment on how the plants are doing in the garden, I'm not judging it just on one plant that I planted. There's 5 to 7 of each of these varieties in my garden. So I can do an overall look at the variety. And if you look at my garden tour, you can tell the different varieties just by looking at the growth rate, how tall it is, how big around it is. You can see where one variety stops and the next one starts. So I'm not judging it just on one plant. All right, folks, we have a few more tomatoes that have ripened out in the garden. This variety here is called a Celebrity. This happens to be the favorite variety of the previous owner when he lived here. This was his go-to variety. The plants are doing well in the garden. It's kind of a medium-sized tomato, but the plants look really good. We've got a pretty good fruit set on the vine. The vines are fairly resistant to blight. This is called a semi-determinate tomato, so it's kind of halfway between an indeterminate and a determinate. So let's cut her open and see what we got inside. So it's a good looking tomato on the inside, very well balanced. It's on the meatier side. It's not a crazy amount of pulp. We're going to give it our little taste test. Very good mouthfeel, very good tomato flavor. Let's do another one. The skin feels just more on the tough side, but it's not off-putting. On the scale of 1 being the most sweetest tomato and 10 being the most acidic, I would give this about a 6. Again, like the Better Boy would be about a 5. It'd have a real good balance. But not a bad tomato, and it's a decent performer. But there's a couple other tomatoes that I've already gone through out there that I do like better than this one. But all in all, I don't think you'd be disappointed with this tomato. The next up is Early Girl. Early Girl is famous for being one of the first tomatoes to ripen in your garden because they are a little more cold tolerant than a lot of your tomato varieties. I've also found even years where I've had struggles growing tomatoes, the Early Girl will set fruit when some of the others will not. So it's pretty reliable tomato. Early Girl is a determinate variety of tomato. I planted my Early Girls probably a month later than the other tomatoes, is why they're not early this year. But it's got a smooth shape. It's small to medium tomatoes. Let's cut it open and see what the inside looks like, and we'll give it a taste. All right, looking at it, it's on the higher side of the pulp content. It's not the most pulp tomato I've ever seen, but it's got more pulp than what we've been seeing with the other varieties. Kelly would definitely not be a variety, or she wouldn't like this variety because she's not big on pulp at all. We'll give this thing a taste. Let's get it cut up. All right, let's give her a shot. You feel that pulp in your mouth right away. If you're a tomato fan, you know, it really doesn't bother you, but it is noticeable. I mentioned Kelly a second ago. She likes pico de gallo and salsa and stuff like that, but she doesn't like a fresh tomato like this. She won't eat it like this because of the pulp. But if you cut it up and kind of squeeze the pulp out of it and do all that, you know, she's a fan. This tomato on the acidic scale, I'm thinking it's probably an 8 or a 9. It's got some acid in it. Would be a decent canner, but you're going to get a lot of juice out of it. So not my favorite, but it does have its redeeming qualities. Our next variety is called Rutgers, R-U-T-G-E-R-S, Rutgers. I don't know if that's a company name or what. And I'm showing you the bottom because the top has a couple blemishes on it. This is the first one to ripen, and there's not another one probably close. So we'll go ahead and use this one. It's a medium to large tomato. The vines are doing fine out in the garden. For a determinate tomato, they're a good sized vine, and they appear to be resistant to disease and blight. So let's get her cut open and see what we got. So we only got 2 slices because those blemishes made their way down a little ways into the tomato. It's a good looking tomato. I don't think it's got as much pulp as that early girl did. Kind of on the medium side of between being meaty and pulp. Cutting it, it got like a kind of a velvety feel as you go down through the tomato with a knife. Very different. But let's give this thing a taste. Very good tomato flavor. This one's really, really on the sweet side. Not even hardly a detectable level of acidity in this tomato. But to me, you know, it's almost too sweet. You kind of need that balance. But for somebody that would like a sweeter tomato, this is the one. And if you were to can this tomato, definitely add some acid to it in the jar to make sure you stay safe with it, because it is a sweet tomato. But it's got a great mouthfeel to it. I'll give it that. My jury's kind of out on this one. I think it's just a hair too sweet, like I said. But I probably won't plant this one again. They're good looking tomatoes. They're nice and smooth. They don't have a lot of bumps on top. So like I said, if you're into a sweet tomato, all right, we got our last 2 varieties that we've been waiting for to ripen. And this first one is a red brandy wine. So this is what she looks like on the outside. The vine's got a very distinctive leaf shape. They're almost like a potato looking leaf. And you can pick them right out when you're walking down the garden row. You can tell which plants are which. And there are some a little bit bigger fruits. This is an indeterminate tomato, but this is what we got. And let's cut her open and see what it looks like inside. All right, it's a decent looking tomato on the inside. Kind of the medium range of pulp and seeds compared to the meatiness on the inside. I gotta admit, I like the look of the red brandy wine better than the the standard brandy wine. So let's give this a taste. It's got a different flavor. You can taste the tomato in it, obviously, but it's not an off-putting flavor, but it is somewhat non-standard, I should say, as far as tomatoes go. On the acidity scale, this would probably be an 8. It'd be a good, like a slicer tomato, I think, would be pretty decent. Yeah, it's not bad. The plants out in the garden seem to be doing okay. I've never had a brandy wine or a Cherokee Purple do worth a darn. I didn't plant any Cherokee Purple this year, but maybe I'll try one next year or two. But there are other tomatoes that I have in the garden that I like better than this one. So I don't know that this red brandy wine will make it back into the garden next year. So let's check out the next one. So this variety is a beefsteak tomato. It's not the best specimen that is out there, but it's the first one that is ripe. There are larger tomatoes. It's a medium to large tomato. It's also an indeterminate tomato. The vines of the beefsteak are not doing well out in the garden. They're only about 1.5 feet, 2 feet tall, and they show lots of signs of disease and blight. But it has set some tomatoes, and we're going to get some tomatoes off of it. And there are some larger than this. So let's check this one out on the inside. So it is beefy on the inside, as the name would suggest. It's got a lot of good meat on the inside of there. Not a terrible amount of pulp. It's a milder tomato. It's got a great flavor. On the acidity scale, this would be about a 6. This would be a fantastic, like a hamburger tomato. Be really good. I just wish the plant was doing better in the garden, because this one would be a contender to come back next year. But like I said, I don't grow just one plant. There's 5 to 7 plants out there of each variety. And every single plant has the same issue. So I think it's specific to the variety, the issues I'm having out in the garden. But so that's what we got, folks. Hope you've enjoyed our tomato review. And if you live in a crazy different area than what we do, we live into a 4B to a 5 zone. So that's what we got going here. I think the biggest contender for next year is definitely going to be the Better Boy again, because I love that tomato. The plant is doing okay on the Better Boy. It's not doing terrible. It's clear to the top of the cattle panel. We'll definitely do the Sweet 100 cherries again, and we'll probably do the Garden Leader tomato again, because they're humongous big slicers and they taste really good. So that'll probably be our 3 tomatoes next year, and if I find a new one I want to throw in, we'll do that just to see how it goes. So until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. Please like the video, because like I said before, it helps the algorithm. It doesn't necessarily help me, but it helps us get out to more people so we can help more people. Also, remember our Facebook page. You can go check us out on Facebook, Mark Kelly Farm on Facebook. and a lot of Kelly's pictures will be on there. She pretty much handles the Facebook page. So again, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time here on Mark Kelly's Farm.